my remembrance of a review I read once. I forgot exactly where, probably the New York Review of Books. And I'm sorry, I forgot who wrote it, so I can't give proper credits. But the content of the remark has made a deep impression on me. Namely, there are bad critics. They criticize a straw man of a theory. There are normal critics who criticize a theory as it in fact stands, as it is truly said. And then there are the excellent critics who amend the weak points of the theory and criticize the thus improved theory in its remaining essential features. So, let me say, I love fighting obscurantism, hard and soft. And, but I'll make my best in seeing what is obscure, the theory itself, or the uses that the theory is put to. And I think this might be a fruitful distinction. Much of what Jon said is criticism of the lack of predictive power. Is it really the essence of a theory to give predictive power? In order to illustrate this, I would like to mention something that Jon did not mention, but I think it was more or less present nevertheless, namely comparison to the natural sciences. Because they make very good predictions sometimes. However, natural science makes good predictions and very accurate predictions only in highly artificial situations. If you look at common day situations, they are no better than the social sciences. And what I want to look into is a little the reasons for that. Take a simple example of a natural phenomenon, a particle of dust floating in the air. It is obviously affected by gravity, but it's also affected by a lot of others. It's affected by electrostatic forces. There's something that's always, you rub something, there are electrostatic forces that will attract. It's affected by the wind. It's affected by magnetism. It may be affected by a lot of different powers. And if you look at your room after a week, you will find that the dust is on your floor. So gravity, in the long run, has the upper hand. However, for each individual particle of dust, at each individual moment, it's floating, being affected by other forces who are at each particular time much larger than the gravity. Any little wind will force it up and it will float around at that. So at no point is gravity the major force acting on that particle, but in the long run it wins. Now, if we look at the social sciences, human behavior. You could, I think, clearly, truthfully say that humans are affected by a lot of forces. And there are a lot of driving, maybe forces you shouldn't borrow the natural science terms, but that there are things affecting our behavior. Rationality is one of them. But, as I said, there are many forces acting on a particle of dust. On me, there is, I may act on rational grounds, I may act because of envy, or for revenge, or because of laziness. I don't care to consider all the options. Of wishful thinking, of course, and very often by a desire to conform to expectations. Perhaps rationally in a sense, because that will gain me further grounds and things like so on later on. Some of these could be better. But if we then make a theory which we call rational choice theory, which is entirely devoted to looking at the consequences of rational behavior. And we find that people do not conform to the predictions of this theory. Should we be surprised? No. We just say that these persons are affected by a lot of other things. And in certain comparison again to the natural sciences, if we can have special situations where we are shielded from a lot of other influences, it might be that we in those situations will find good agreement with the theory. But if we want to be good predictors, and the reason why Jon says that we might do well with a theory with small deviations from a previous state is, of course, that all these other factors can then be assumed to be rather constant for during these small deviations. But if you make large deviations, all these other factors will take different values and influence differently. So if we really want rational choice theory to be a guide to predictions in a larger perspective, we must supplement it with theories of envy, of revenge, or whatever other thought of factors that might influence others. And we know there has been nothing like a comparative amount of effort put into making those of these. What we can do at most is say, if it doesn't fit, there must be some other factor. And that again, by comparison to natural sciences, has very often been the case for new discoveries. Namely, things do not behave as predicted, so we look for something else. For example, a very exact example of this is the theories of the stars and the heavenly bodies, where in antiquity there was a theory of epicycles of spheres, and little spheres moving on the surface of those spheres, and even smaller spheres moving on, and so on. How was this arrived at? Well, there is a periodicity of the movement of the heavenly bodies. Make a table of that. Then compare the table to actual observations. You will find deviations. But you will find that the deviations have a structure, and they move sometimes larger, sometimes smaller. So you make a model for the deviations. That is making the second sphere on the surface of the heaven. And then you take the sum of the original model plus the model of the deviation, and then you compare to observations again, and you find deviations, again, much smaller this time, again, with a definite structure, and then you construct a third sphere, and you reached, in antiquity, you reached the level of accuracy of measurement when you had the fourth sphere. In modern physics, we can go on forever, and this is actually the actual procedure when you make predictions of the heavenly bodies. You don't use Newton's equations. You can't solve them easily. You use this sort of mechanism instead. But the point is, failure of prediction is an incentive to look at the theory or explanation of why the deviations occur. So my first comment, my first sort of criticism is that lack of predictive power is not a conclusive argument against rational choice theory. You must, in order to compare it to actual behavior, you have to have some sort of idea of what other factors are influencing that person. Perhaps organizational explanation of this is that while the natural sciences are kept distinct from technology, where technology is fixing gadgets, they will actually work in a very predictable way. Natural sciences are basically concerned with understanding the fundamental forces and mechanisms of the world, and under which conditions they do work. But fixing the conditions in such a way that they will work in a predictable way is the task of technology. And perhaps social scientists are too often called upon in order to do engineering tasks, rather than looking at the fundamental forces and finding out their systems. So this is under the general heading of making a distinction between the theory of rational choice and the use of that theory. It's a naive use to just say that we now apply it and see if people move, or people behave according to it. It is also if we look at some of the critical comments, it's also, this is some things which is too seldom mentioned, that actually the theory of rational choice is not the selection of a probability distribution that you believe in, or a set of desires that you actually have. The theory as such says that there are a lot of rationality. You make decisions for a lot of alternatives. The internal structure of that is that it should follow a lot of axioms, among some of which are some sorts of substitution axioms, actually heavily criticized by Ellsberg, who was mentioned here. And the point, the mathematical result is that if your choices or preferences, and they may be, there's nothing in the theory that said that they should pertain to you. They may be entirely altruistic or on behalf of someone else or whatever. But if this set of decisions and preferences fulfill certain criteria, then there exists a measure which we might call utility. And then there exists a function, formally like a probability function, such that your decisions or preferences will be as if you maximized this function by this property. But need not be your true estimation of probability. It need not reflect your actual desires. So if you want to really look at the theory, you should look at which of these axioms do you not really believe on. My answer is the substitution axiom, the same as Ellsberg, but that's a different matter. But that is what I mean to go at a deeper level and try to look at the theory in its best presentation. Also, in that presentation, there is no question of calculating anything. It only says that if you do it for whatever reason, by revelation or intuition or whatever, then your structure of your decisions will be as if it was computed in this way. So this, I think, is against the idea that there is no real-time uncertainty in calculating this. Compare with another example from the natural sciences. Gravity is ever present in the universe. Everything I drop is affected by the gravity of the Earth, the Sun, the stars, everything. How can a little stone here calculate the gravitational forces from all the stars in the universe? It can't. It doesn't. But nevertheless, it will fall according to the combined gravitational forces of everything in the universe. So it can do it somehow without calculating. So this is well, there's some other aspect to criticism. Yes, for example, you had a good eye to just so stories of different kinds. What do you think of evolutionary theory? Generally speaking, it's only after the fact where you can say that this is why so and so happens. And it might be admissible to do that also in some cases in the social sciences. Not necessarily as a first choice, but sometimes admissible. I could also express some dissatisfaction with the fact that you concentrated on hard obscurantism, because hard obscurantists, they have subscribed to some standards. You may not agree with those standards, but they have subscribed to some standard. Where I find that the problem with soft obscurantism is they haven't described to any standards. And whenever you try to criticize them according to some standards, they just switch to another standard. So therefore, I think there would be a more important goal of criticism. But my main point here is that you shouldn't really criticize social sciences for excessive ambitions. You might very well criticize it for excessive claims. But since most social scientists just take a theory and use it, and a full agreement that this is so prevalent that you really should do other things as well. But they don't try to make comparable theories for other things, and they make excessive claims because they are not do not have enough initiatives, they do not have enough, it doesn't pay in the university competitions and all that sort of things. So, in fact, I see that the reasons that we have an unsatisfactory state somehow is, as I said, excessive claims, but in fact too modest, these are due to too modest ambitions. Because one simply too easily takes a theory, claims that it is applicable to this or that, without really specifying the conditions for applicability, or not matching it and with parallel theories reflecting other facts about human behavior. So let that be my concluding note. Thank you.